Welcome to Business Connection. I'm Liz Spencer with a fascinating guest in studio today. It's Wayne White, and he's the owner and board certified master arborist of Emerald Tree Care. Welcome, Wayne. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I think a lot of us underestimate our trees. Tell me a little bit about your background.
I started out in college with a forestry degree. I grew up loving the outdoors and thought that I would actually want to go into timber production in the beginning. And I started working in the furniture industry in the very beginning. Then I went on and got my master's in business. And luckily for me at that point, I moved into the landscape and nursery industry at that point. And as time went on, I got more and more interested in the science of arboriculture and became Michigan's third board certified master arborist that they'd ever had. Wow. And we still don't have that many today, but I'm one of about 750 in the world at that level. That's great.
So when we call Emerald Tree Care, is that one of the big distinguishing factors, is the certification for you?
Well, not just me, but my entire staff. So it's a family-owned and operated company, and everybody has kind of followed my footsteps to become more educated. If you call us, you're going to have the phones answered by a certified arborist. If a technician comes out to work on your property, they're going to be certified. If we're getting involved in pruning, we're going to have not only certified arborists, but those guys are actually going to have advanced qualifications in tree risk assessment. They're going to be certified tree safety professionals. We really stand out as being highly educated, highly trained.
And I think that's wonderful, because many of us don't think about our trees until we get in trouble. When and why should we call?
Obviously, the biggest calls we get is something's wrong at that point. We get to come out and look, and maybe we can fix it, maybe we can't at that point. But even when you first buy a property, give us a call. There's a free property evaluation. We might be able to spot something that you need to be concerned about. You may have pruning issues, that maybe the trees are getting too close to your house. Or maybe you have an insect disease issue that you don't realize is really going on. Maybe you're putting too much mulch in the beds. There's things that we can do to help you keep your landscape looking its best if we get involved early on.
Well, you mentioned insects. A lot of us hear from the media the ash borer beetle, but there are there's that, and there's other things that can impact our trees that way.
Yeah, probably the emerald ash borer everybody's heard of because it's gotten the most press, because from a financial standpoint it's caused the most damage, not only to homeowners but to cities and municipalities. But there's a lot more insects that are out there that are quite common. Last year was probably the worst year for Japanese beetle. Hopefully this year won't be as bad, because we did have a nice killing frost during the winter.
It was colder than normal.
Yeah. But there's a new one that people probably aren't watching. So the viburnum leaf beetle has been in Illinois for several years, but probably the last 2 it's really exploded. So this particular insect is going to destroy some viburnum that are very common in the landscape. Arrowwood viburnum, in the European and American cranberry bush viburnums are both affected. Pretty easy to treat for. By the time you notice it, you'll have heavy defoliation that's going on. We also have to deal with scale insects, magnolia scale, euonymus scale, leucanium scale on oaks. These are all insects that most people don't notice until they've already kind of sucked the life out of the plant that's there. But easy to treat for if we catch it early on. And then we've got a number of diseases that are in the area that we also have to worry about. There's the crab apples that need to be sprayed for apple scab if they're susceptible. You've got hawthorns that get bothered by cedar hawthorn rust, sycamore anthracnose. But probably the biggest thing that people are noticing is that your evergreens in your yard have really started to not look well in the last couple of years. The weather has been way too cold at night and too humid right about this time of the year. In the last 2 years, it's been really bad. And we're dealing with needle cast diseases and blights that are really affecting them badly. And these trees can go downhill very quickly if you don't get involved in treatment. So you need to call and make sure that that's looked at as soon as possible.
I never even knew that many disease and bugs existed for my trees, but so that's fascinating. And thinking, when you're going through there, I could identify the evergreen in my yard. Mm-hmm. The rest of the trees, I'm not sure, and I'm sure I'm not alone. I don't know all of what I have. But I'm thinking I have to go look at that evergreen. Talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned something about mulch, and I know I put mulch around my trees and that, and I never thought about my trees from the surface down. I've never thought about the underground, the root system. I just look and admire them from the ground up.
We're starting to find out that many, many nurseries may actually be planting the trees too deep in the nursery to start with. Then they cultivate them when they're growing, and by the time they harvest them, the trees are planted too deep in the ball in which they're harvested in. Then a landscaper brings it out to a property and they may plant the tree too deep, and then we bury them in mulch. So the whole story of mulch, and this is critical and is probably the one thing that's missed the most out there, is mulch is supposed to be no more than 2 to 3 inches deep, not per year, total, none of it touching the trunk of the tree.
Wow.
So as soon as you start seeing these volcano mounds where you've got 12 inches of mulch piled up against the trunk, what you're doing is you're retaining moisture against that trunk. So when you have too much mulch piled up against the trunk, you're actually retaining too much moisture against there. You're allowing insects an easy access into the tree, and you're encouraging the fine root hairs of this tree to grow into this mulch and rotting mulch in the soil that's actually starting the beginning process of girdling the trunks. So this whole area of what's going on directly around the tree is critical. You really don't want to have grass growing all the way up against the trunk, because then you might damage it with a weed whip, but you really need to have the proper amount of mulch. We have terrible soils here in the Midwest. Trees really like well-drained, gravelly soil, low pH. And guess what we have in the Midwest? Heavily compacted clay soils. They don't drain well at all. And the pH is very high because underlying it all is limestone rock. So it's very difficult to have nice growing soils like we might have more on the East Coast. So you need to be able to alter that as well as you can. We can treat the soil, and many times we can fix it permanently by air spading and loosening and cultivating the soil and putting soil amendments into the clay so that the clay doesn't rebind itself and compact itself. It's all an area that most homeowners would never think of. You just dig a hole, stick the tree in, and they grow, but it's much more than that. And most of the problems when it leads to the poor health of a tree has something to do with the fact of where the trees are growing.
Well, and you mentioned roots, and you do something with root collaring, so you actually work beneath the tree at its roots more than just pruning and trimming.
Yeah, we can. We can actually use a tool called an air spade, where we're actually introducing air at 1,200 miles an hour, fracturing the soil, exposing the root system. Very few people own an air spade. Very few people get involved in root collar excavation work. But we can also find that original basket that was around that tree when it was first planted. And believe it or not, the top ring of that basket can cause serious problems in girdling this tree later on. It's very good early on, within the first couple of years of planting, that this area around the tree get fixed. Remove that top ring of the basket, loosen up the soil, add soil amendments, and you'll be fixing that tree for decades where it won't have to be re-looked at again.
Wayne, you have an amazing amount of knowledge. And I think that's one of the reasons that with Emerald Tree Care that you get more than just somebody to come out and cut and prune your trees or do that. You get whole tree care and something that lasts for a lifetime. So I can't thank you enough for stopping by and telling us a little bit about what you do, and we wish you continued success.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back with more Business Connection.